And maybe this guy should be the one who gets out. And perhaps part of the reason why other cultures don't really even try and intervene with what's going on with goblins.
Wait, why would a vagrant mean that they don't intervene?
This is a if this is the only goblin you see as an expat, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, then perhaps your understanding of why people aren't going in and helping the other goblins becomes, I don't know. Maybe this is sort of like your, we could prejudice the player more or less. They come from playing another race and then they play the vagrant and they're like, oh, okay, I understand why people don't like them. I wouldn't help them either. And then it's kind of this very different sort of view of goblins than the Blight Martyr would give you.
Hmm.
Whereas the Blight Martyr is this very redeemable character who's just trying to get something done, even though the means are perhaps morally wrong. The Vagrant is a character who just wants something more than what he had and is willing to get it by any means necessary. Depending on at which point you come in, your impressions of goblin culture will be colored. I suppose in either one very polar way or another, someone's mic is breathing through. It stopped. So thoughts?
Uh, hmm. Anybody? Mal? Henry?
We do want like your feedback, guys. It is valuable to us. Specifically, I don't really get to hear what you guys are coming up with most of the time. So if you have any ideas, no matter how small it is, or they are, feel free to share them.
So, if this guy wasn't a if you had this class, but he wasn't an, living in a different culture, most of his moveset would be something that he would use on other goblins.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. I mean, he would have trained up this move set being there.
Uh-huh.
And sort of carried it over. I think in other cultures, intimidation tactics would work. Like you just intimidate someone into giving you what they have. In Goblin culture, it wouldn't work that way. You run someone in a dark alley and it's a fight to the death. You kill whoever's trying to accost you. Because you know that they're not going to stop until they've killed you and taken what you have. It's not like there's a mercy aspect to it.
Hmm. Here's a question.
Sure.
Do you believe characters should be redeemable?
I don't necessarily think that all characters have to be redeemable. I think as long as the
Okay.
audience has a reasonable expectation that someone can be redeemed, and then, well, at least from the very outset of a story, you can then subvert
Okay.
that expectation.
Yeah. The thing about the Vagrant makes me think that he's a guy that's worse than any goblin and worse than like he does something that's clearly like more because it's him and less because it's a goblin.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that's why people are confused. Like it comes to a certain point where like if you know enough about like the story of what this guy did, you're like, oh yeah,
You know,
this guy was bad.
I think that's a really good point. Is like, and that should perhaps be the conflict of how people are seeing him. It's like it's very
Right,
clear to
because
the person
it's
playing.
their only example of goblin
Yeah,
anything. Yeah.
yeah, and this isn't how goblins are. It's just that this guy's a terrible envoy or emissary.
Yeah.
Goblin culture.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know. Then I have to think about what awful things he's done or what he's about to do, or even if it's that awful, it's possible that like it just gets blown out of proportion, I suppose. But
That'd be interesting too. It could be that what he wants to do is more awful than what he has actually done, or what he wanted to do is more awful than what he's done. Maybe he gets off lightly, initially at least. I don't know.
mm,
I'd have to think about it. That's sort of the issue, I think, with not having any of the redesign work done when we're talking about these. Is I don't know in which direction the class is going to go from here. Let's see. My Skype is lagging, so I'm thinking, I'm not sure how to make a goblin even worse goblin. Just really desperate. Yeah, I think that's, I guess, the interesting part about this is just that even though the goblins are in a really shit place and most of the things that they're doing from an outside perspective are bad, it's just because that's, I mean, that's the, I don't want to say normal thing, but it's basically something that's come to be understood as normal within the place that they exist. This is how you go about from day to day. This is how you survive. This is how you ensure that the people around you survive. So.
Right, there's a cutthroat ideology that's kind of just unspoken, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. The card they've been dealt, yeah.
So.
I mean, but this guy takes it to the extra step. I mean, he could. Like, another concept I have is just that people who tend to be in shitty situations tend to resent people who are in great situations, and that unlike every other goblin who doesn't like lash out at a richer race or someone who's doing better than them, that this guy is just like the one guy to do what everyone's thinking and like pointlessly murder a rich person or something.
Yeah, I think it would be different. I think it'd be different for the goblins if they didn't live so close to the dwarves. I mean, they might have just gotten along fine. The issue is that, like, instead of having to produce all of this stuff, all of these structures and everything else, it's just there. And the dwarves don't even, I mean, from their actions at least, when they don't go back and reclaim a city, it seems that they have so much that taking one city and killing so many people, if it means a little bit more comfort for you, isn't such a terrible thing. It's kind of like the kid who gets 50 presents for Christmas and can't open all of them. And even if they do open all of them, doesn't touch the bike until 2 months later.
Right.
Yeah. So it's weird that the dwarves are technically being nice to the goblins by default, but they don't mean it.
Kind of. I mean, it's just that they have so much that they can't adequately defend it. I mean, if you guys have played, there's an example given in one of the extra credits episodes that I watched. They're talking about how I forget the game's name. I think it's called Defender or something, or Missile Defense. It was this old arcade game. The guy says it's one of the games with perfect mechanics, or perfect
Mechanic is metaphor.
Mechanic is metaphor. Yeah. Thank you, Henry. Basically, you have 3 bases that you have to defend from incoming missiles, and as the game goes on, you realize it's harder and harder to defend all of the bases, and then as a base dies, the game actually becomes easier. But your whole goal is to defend as many of the towns as you can, or at least your narrative goal is to defend as many of the towns as you can. What you learn is that it's much easier to defend 1 than it is to defend 3, and so you start sacrificing them strategically. And so, yeah, I mean, Henry's right, and I think the episode's right. It is one of those perfect examples of mechanics as metaphor. But I think the dwarves are in the same position, where they have just way too many towns to defend from this goblin onslaught, and they have to utilize their resources wisely.
Okay, I have an altered concept where the reason this guy is so bad is because he's like somehow by chance he's the one who receives the worst shit of it. Like he's a perfect emblematic example of why the goblins are in their situation, but also why goblins don't technically deserve it. Like not only does he do bad things, but the reason he does bad things are because other people have been doing bad things to him.
Okay, so at what point do we pick up on his story? Or are we experiencing any of it through flashback or something like that? Or are we...
I mean, I think it should be the day he decides that, like, yeah, I like it too, Mao. Mao, do you have more specifics? If you like it, carry on with it, because I don't have much to say to that.
I don't know. I would love to hear what Mayo has to say because I don't know where we find this guy. Like if we have to explain that all this shit's happened to him, then it doesn't make sense to pick it up right as he's an expat, unless what we're experiencing now is just that how he's being treated, even though he's out of it, is what's causing him to be this way.
To me, it's the concept that like goblins have a great opportunity to create vendettas and don't. Like like it's not their fault that they were born there or like died there. Like it's completely situational, and people around them have the opportunity to help them, and they don't. And so, like, it's very easy for people to take advantage, and some people probably do. And so, I'd like this guy to just like have enough people who have like shat on his life or taken advantage of him that like we join him at the moment that he decides that he's going to leave the goblin area and like kill those people like as a lashback to like make people realize that the goblins can't be taken advantage of, or they can but this will happen, or at least as some kind of almost fruitless hurrah to show at least that he is not someone who's going to get taken advantage of.
So he leaves and then he arrives somewhere, and that's like the first. That's chapter one. That's the very beginning.
Yeah. It's Kill Bill goblin style.
Right. So he goes to take revenge on these unseen people who have better lives than he does.
I think so.
This is
I
right after the shittiest day of his life, I guess.
I don't know about that. Like, I think Goblin Life is just always shitty, and it's just simply
But
that.
this is the shittiest of the shitty.
Right.
This was the
I think
final
it's just
straw.
the angriest. Like, I think it's just like everyone snaps. Like, it would be very hard not to get broken in the society. I just think it's the 800th and 90th day after he snaps, and he's like, I have nothing better to do. Like, why have I been sitting here like every other broken person? I think it's like on every goblin's mind. There's like if the world works as how we talk about it works, there's probably people in every goblin's mind that they'd love to go and kill, that they just know better.
But how much do the goblins know about the outside world? Like, they've been around for a long time, but they're getting embargoed by dwarves. So if he were going to go somewhere, he'd go to the Dwarven Society to take revenge on them. So
Yeah, probably.
maybe he goes to do that, and then he sees a trade caravan heading out from one of the cities, and he's never seen a trade caravan before. And he runs to catch up with them, and then he starts talking to them, and they haven't even really seen a goblin before, but he asks if they can take them as far as they're going, him as far as they're going, just to see what the world's like, to see if it's any different before he makes his decision to go and kill everyone that he can.
Yeah. I mean, there's a chance to tell a story about like how trade and economics work, like who benefits off of the goblins being poor.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's that. But I also just like the idea it's like just a really personal vendetta, and that in some way that the way that this character is redeemed is not like not a very good one. It's just that like it's just true. Like something awful to him has been done by someone else, and it was because he was a goblin. And so his choice is to destroy that person's life.
Do they have to be mutually exclusive?
No, I don't suppose so.
Just wondering. All right, so I think unless Mio had an idea that he wanted to toss in, I know you were considering something. That we can move on to the last class. Let's go to the anarchist.
Okay.
All right, so we created this class for one reason and one reason only, and we haven't gotten rid of any of the bad design because it stands there as a testament to how poorly we did RNG the first time around. Basically, I figured we have 28 classes in the game. There are some sorts of players that really like random number generation in their combat. And perhaps if we make a class that's entirely based around RNG, then that will find some player who really enjoys that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So his mechanics are completely RNG. And the first time that we went through and designed this guy, basically after every single attack or anything that he did, any action he took, he'd roll a d6. That was back when we were playing at pen and paper. But initially, when you got those abilities, rolling a d6 wouldn't do anything. You were just told to roll a d6. And then later on, you started to get effects that would go off depending on which number you rolled. None of that's particularly important now, but I'd still like to have this guy be the RNG class. if we're going to keep him. And I don't know really what kind of story there is to tell with this guy, like what the politics are of Goblin culture, why an anarchist would be necessary.
I mean, technically they're all anarchists. They
Right.
all live in like a temporary autonomous zone that works off of a bunch of unplanned actions.
So he'd be a patriot.
I mean, he's an anarchist patriot and a patriot anarchist. It makes no difference.
So, I mean, I guess the reason that I'm wondering is because I don't know what story he would want to tell at all. It's not like he's taking down some establishment or anything like that. He just exists. He's the guy who runs in the mob throughout the dwarven streets when they invade a place. He's not particularly important. He's just there to cause damage.
I mean, so like the philosophy behind it reminds me of like Albert Camus and like The Stranger and stuff, in which like a guy goes ahead and just does whatever opportunities are presented to him because he has no personal investment really in what happens.
Interesting. I think that would be a cool route to explore. Is like, what is free will in a goblin culture? Are you just taking the opportunities presented to you, and that works well with the mechanics of just having all of the mechanics be RNG for the class. So the narrative will feel maybe very loose, kind of like no real overstructure to it. But when you come to a decision point, do you take it or don't you take it? And perhaps having you. Perhaps having that not really matter.
Yeah, I think the more important thing, like the interesting thing, at least about Albert Camus stories, well, one of the interesting things was that it always mattered to everyone else. It just didn't matter to the absurdist hero. Like the absurdist hero could have wind up in jail, headed towards a death sentence, and he would still not totally care because it was his life and it was happening, and he didn't really think he had a choice.
So this is someone who's very aware within their own narrative.
I guess. I'm not sure I want to rip off Albert Camus, but...
No, but we can be inspired by Camus.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm probably slaughtering his last name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it
Camus
correctly.
is correct.
Okay. But yeah, we could be. It's interesting. I don't know that... Like, to me, at least, the most interesting part about writing it would be that the choices given to the player would appear meaningless. Like, we would have to write choices that were almost vague or, like, separated enough from the situation as to appear that this is, like, a very aimless experience to begin with, and always will be.
Right.
And that way, I'm not sure it would even be fun. I don't know. It
Maybe
seems to make branching not that interesting.
Maybe it doesn't have to be traditionally fun.
Well, no.
Just
I'm just how would it be otherworld, like uniquely fun then?
because perhaps this is a person who has a singular awareness of exactly how absurd all of this is, for whatever reason. Like maybe
He's a very self-aware guy.
Yeah. I memean, we say that there's not very much education in whatever this society is, but all right, let's just say hypothetically, and maybe this is a poor idea. I don't know. I'll just throw it out there. Maybe this guy actually got a hold of a book somehow, or some sort of something.
And he learned how to read.
No, he didn't learn how to read. I was thinking a book at first, but maybe he actually had contact with someone outside of this society in some way.
Okay.
You know, maybe he's got an outside perspective on how shitty all of this is, and he sees people being gutted in alleyways, and he just thinks of how ridiculous it is that that's normal. That all of this chaos around him is something that he willingly participates in as a citizen of it every day.
He sounds to me, he sounds like a more interesting character to make an expat, or just another character to make an expat, simply because everything would be alien to him and all this, like, because of where he comes from.
Okay,
so like, it all seems ridiculous.
So
like,
maybe we look at it in the other way. Maybe this guy is a guy who was an expat and came back. So we can we can explore the vagrant as being an expat who's leaving, and an anarchist as being one who's coming back.
That's an interesting concept. And what is he like? Is he trying to convince everyone that their life is meaningless?
Maybe.
goblins are just living a ridiculous, pointless life, and if they all like somehow were able to leave, like there would be no point to any of it.
Yeah, maybe he knows exactly how fruitless that is,
Hmm.
but he's trying.